Yep.
Chance have extra USBs.
Yeah.
I left my USB at the makerspace.
I know.
I have to get it next week.
Yeah, he said 10 days.
I know. I was like, it's because I was using it to make my shirts.
Okay.
USB. So I was like,
I was thinking about that. Like, you can make a lot of money just selling T-shirts.
you know what? I think my boyfriend convinced me to trademark the thing I made. So we'll see. I'm looking into it. He really loved my shirt. The shirt I made him. So I'm gonna bring my little brother and sister next week.
Oh, that's cool.
So they're vaccinated, so I'll just give
Yeah.
them their pass.
You can keep it.
Oh, thank you. Are you sure?
Yeah, I have many. You should see my office. I bought a little refrigerator for my office because they moved one of the ones there. Oh, and it's over here. And so I was like, it's kind of nice to have cold drinks when I get out of class.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I bought a little one because I was gonna buy the one that you can carry.
Yeah.
But it was like almost the same price as the regular one. So
The little mini refrigerators?
yeah.
Wait, your office is not over there anymore?
It's right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't get, well, I opt out of because the math department, they wanted to do the STEM counseling at the Welcome Center. So some of the faculty moved over there, or they're already over there in SAS.
You know what? I heard about that because sometimes I work at the Welcome Center, and then there's the counseling, and then there's the faculty.
Yeah, we're all faculty, but there's counseling faculty and there's instructional faculty.
Okay.
Counseling faculty, they do teach classes, but they're like counseling classes, like, you know, how to go to college, how to plan, how to do financial planning, those type of classes. Yeah, so they are considered faculty, and librarians are faculty, but they are librarian faculty. So they're different, and counseling and librarian faculty, they report to the Department of Student Services. And then instructional faculty, we report to our deans. And, you know, Dr. Graveen is the dean for STEM and CTE. And then Bree, I don't know if you met her, Anaspita.
Oh, no, but I've heard of her.
Yeah, she does like humanities, English, you know, the other subjects.
Okay.
And so, you know, ultimately, we're all faculty. It's just, I think for us who teach classes, we are operational. And then for the counseling faculty, they prepare the student before they start in some of the classes, or, you know, if you take like those classes that they require at the beginning when you start college, those are counseling. Yeah.
This is the guidance class.
Yeah, guidance classes are counseling faculty. And then sometimes they also teach regular classes if their credential is qualified to do that. But usually they either have an MFA or like a master in psychology or counseling or something like that.
I know one counselor, Dr. Pacheco.
Oh yeah, Maria.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's great.
Oh yeah, she's really sweet. I just saw her.
Yeah. I used to be in curriculum committee with her, and she's great. She's really nice. Yeah. And yeah, so there are a lot of counseling faculty here.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, so we are gonna do lab 4-1. I'm gonna walk you through it. I'm also on Zoom, so let me share screen in case people pop in there. But let me download this. So we're not using any crazy equipment today. My projection for I need to still post the lecture, I'm sorry. My projection for the next lab is gonna be a little bit of virtual machine. I'm gonna see if I can get the server to work. If not, we do have server in this room, but the process in getting it, you know, going and stuff might take a little longer because I know I only have about an hour or so with you. So I will set up the virtual machine and then we're gonna do some role installation so you know how to set up servers. I normally do that with this class. So, okay, I got drives from iMake Innovation Center, so I plan to use it for the next one. But if not, I really don't want to use Practice Lab, but if we can't, then we have to use Practice Lab. All right. So you can download Lab 401. Okay. Pretty easy in that we are going to do IP configuration in Windows. And then there is another part later on that you can see down here. I'm using the same Ubuntu virtual machine that I used in my 30E just to streamline the process. So if you want, you can also download this. So I'm going to go ahead and click download. So that might take a little bit. So you can go ahead and download that. But I do have that running on my laptop. So we're going to download anyway. So it doesn't take very long. I think in this lab, it's somewhat decent connection. So, all right. So let's talk about what we have for today. Let me change the view on this. Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
We're going to get started. We're doing lab 4.1. And then if you want to kind of prepare ahead, you can go to part B and download the virtual machine. Okay. If you don't have, yeah, you won't have it because you're not in my other class. So I'm using Ubuntu, which is KDE Ubuntu. Looks a little bit different than Ubuntu for the second part of the lab. So we are going to use Windows 10 for the first part, pretty easy. We're just going to do static IP configuration for the first part. Okay, so give you a couple minutes to get situated. We officially start at 3:45. So I know some of the students are coming in now.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so this is on your Canvas. So in the lecture for this week, you are going to do a little bit of binary conversion. I put some example in the notes, but I will put up some video tonight and tomorrow morning because usually I do multi-part videos, so it's not like 2 hours video, so boring, right? Then because it's going to talk about Subnet Mask and all of that. The book doesn't really go into subnetting, probably not until later. So we'll touch on, you know, how to calculate IP address that might not be in the same traditional class because you do see some of that. So we can actually expand our range of IP address and lean it into another class. You can do that by tweaking the subnet mask. But just to start for this week, a little bit of binary conversion and how to look at IP addresses. Okay. All right. So for this lab, we are going to work with primarily the first part is I like for you to use the wireless adapter. So in the case where if you configure your Ethernet adapter to a static IP, it's going to remove your system from the network. And you don't want to do that because you're going to lose internet connection and then you can't download anything that you need to for the next part. So just like what we've done before in your Windows, 10, just go ahead and check your settings and then make sure that your Wi-Fi is enabled, which it should be. So you're connecting wirelessly. You can on the Alienware, or you can use the Ethernet. So we are going to mainly configure the Wi-Fi. Okay. So now we know that static IP is only being used for dedicated system. You shouldn't have to configure static IP for every single computer. That will not be efficient. We know that we would use dynamic host control protocol system like your wireless router at home or a server to distribute IP address. And I hope that I can get everything going smoothly. Every semester is a different thing because Microsoft, their ISO, sometimes you know, they control the license in that. Sometimes that works on VMware. Sometimes it doesn't work on the new version of VMware or VirtualBox. So, but I like to show you how you can configure the ranges for the HCP in the next lab. So in case if you ever need to configure that, you will know how to do that. And because that's part of networking ultimately, right? So here we go. So in Windows 10, you're gonna use Control Panel this time. And similar to, and this is my small icon view. If you wanted to go to category, you can always switch your view. This is the default view for most part, but the image that they create here, the administrator, they like to use the small icon. So I'm going to use the category view because this is what you see at home, okay, unless you change it out of the box. So we are going to go to network and internet, okay, which is, if you look at the step, that will be step 2. And then we are going to go view status. Okay. So now you have network connections here. Let me see if it's not seeing. Okay. So let's try this. So when you're here, I'm missing a step because when I use my laptop, it doesn't require, it would show multiple connection here. But if you ever need to change other adapter than the default adapter, you're going to go to change adapter settings, which takes you here. So traditionally, hello, when you look at Windows 7 or Windows 8, you're going to see something like this, okay? And every time that you have any kind of adapter, you would see it on here. So for example, this is my Wi-Fi. See how it says it's not connected? So my Ethernet is going to be the one that's connected. So I can right click and then choose connect, right? And then I can just, you know, connect it to RCCD or something like that. Now, so now what we have is, because in order for it to work, right, it's gonna want to open up things. Sorry. Let me minimize that. Okay. So now my wireless adapter is connected. And so when you look back to this, right now it shows up there. So earlier you didn't see that there because I didn't have it connect to any wireless network, and it's going to want to connect to wireless network in order to show there. And that's the downside when you're looking at the adapter from the control panel compared to when you're looking at it from a settings or in the device manager, right? So here it is. It shows that I'm connected to the network, right? And if I need to configure it, I simply click on it and it would show me this. So the wireless property is only going to refer to like the 802.11 area of it. You want to go to the adapter property, which is this section, right? This button right here. Okay. So what step am I looking at? Let me minimize some of this so you can see. So right now, right, I'm at step 5. Okay. So we are going to click on the properties. And here what you have is, notice that even though this is a wireless adapter, if you install, like we said before, any virtual machine hypervisor, which is the software to open virtual machine. It's going to create those, right? So what you want to do is you're going to click on Internet Protocol version 4, which is, it would need more of the configuration. And then we can go to properties. Okay, so I click on this, I go to properties. Okay, now if we put in an IP, the static IP, you would want to start with that here, right? And then so we can start with, like, you know, Cynthia's 101 and then Alma's 102 and so on. So you're going to spread out the number. So there should not be a conflict of IP. That means that we cannot have a duplicate IP if we're using static IP. So your printer and your PC cannot have the same IP, right? It's going to create conflict and it's not going to know who's receiving and who's sending. So in the Windows and operating system, it's, if you use already existing IP, it's going to tell you that there's an error. Okay, so I'm going to use a higher number. So you can spread it out 192.168.0. So let's say I'm going to do 238 or let's see 138, 128. Okay. And then you can pick another number, right? So you have, so if we were looking at the wireless router that we have from last week or the week before, the range for the DHCP is between 100 or whatever. What you want is, you want, usually the static IP is for dedicated system like server. So you would have something that's earlier in the range, like .12 or .10 or something like that. So I'll let you pick. Okay, and then when you click on the subnet mask, it automatically fills the octet in. So what does this mean? When you see 255 like this, that's going to refer to that octet. That's going to be the network ID. So that means that 192 is going to be a network ID. Okay, and then this octet is, it's all the bits are on. So that means that this is also a network ID. And then this is going to be another octet that's going to be all the bits are on. So this is a Class C address. So that means that that is also a network ID. So we would never ever use a broadcast address which ends with a .0 or a .255. Okay, you can never use. So those are invalid IP. There are systems that has those IP as it would be broadcasting to other systems. If you want send and receive, you do not use any IP with a .0 at the end or any IP with a .255 at the end. Those are reserved for broadcasting, okay, and also hosting. You don't use those. So you can use any number between 1 and 254, but in some case, if you are setting up your subnet to end at 254, 254 becomes your broadcast address. So you do not want to use that one either. So it's safe to say that we want to go with something between 1, right, and before 254 at 254, and you're okay. So that means that this is going to be my host. So if I'm 128 and Jarrell is 101 and Alma is .2, we are all unique system with unique number. So the way that we look at this is, think of this, these numbers here are like the city and the town where you're from, okay? Because you and I can be from the same town, okay? But then we are individual as we are different hosts. So the way the system is set up is that the host number will be unique to its identity, and the network is going to be what area is that it's existing, right? So the router, it's going to need to see which network your system exists in. It's going to pass the packet to that network, and then the switch is going to pick up the rest and identify, right, the host portion of it based on the data frame and the MAC address. Okay, the router doesn't work inside the network. It's working out like at the edge of the network. Sometimes we install router internally in the network where we would separate little networks inside. But ultimately, the router job is to get the traffic to your network. The switch job is to get the traffic to your system. And that's how it works. Okay. All right. So once you set this, we want to put the default gateway, which is normally your router. Okay. So 192.168.0.1. And that will be the one that's going to format your packet information for your network, right? Because every network is different. So when it gets to the gateway, normally the router or another system, then that system is going to take it and say, okay, it's going to prepare it for A network or for B network or for C network. Okay, so that's the job of the gateway. Then the DNS server, if you have a role like that, and usually it's a server. So if I have a router at .1, likely that my other appliances would be .2, .3, .4, .5, and so on. So let's pretend that we have an actual DNS, a domain name server, which I hope to show you how to set that up. Oh, we would just put like a 192.168.0, let's say .10. Okay, so that will be like, so can you have a .10 for DHCP, DNS, you know, WINS, all of those? Sure, you can. A lot of companies, including RCCD, use one machine, right? And so when you install the server, you can add the roles. So all of these people saying server, you think that they're individual system. All it is just a role that system take on. So you can have one physical system with one network interface card that can be taking on DHCP, DNS, and WINS and all the other roles. Now, the downside of it is that, you know, if you make it like a remote server and the print server and all of that, right, the resource is going to be heavily used. One, second, it's a single point failure, right? That's not good for security. But ultimately, the positive side of that is going to be, you know, the maintenance, the cost. We reduce some of that. So many companies, they virtualize out of one. So when you install DNS, it's going to want Active Directory from Microsoft, because you need user to log into your domain, right? System to log into your domain. And then it normally you would see that, you know, DHCP goes with DNS and so on. So if you don't believe me, you can do ipconfig all and you can look at our CCD address. They might have alternate DNS, right? So for the company that runs web services, they're going to have alternate DNS. They have many. So in the case of Amazon that they do hosting, they have thousands. Okay. So in an enterprise environment, you want to have more than one. Why is that? Because you might have, if you have one, if that is down, nobody logs in, right? Nobody connects. Because once I set up a DNS, my client system has to join it. So when you turn on your computer here, they have already been joined to the domain. Okay. So that's how, you know, and when you're looking at your email addresses, right, those servers are connected to the main domain server where you would get the, you know, rccd.edu. Okay, that's the fully qualified domain name. And then you have, you know, the subsequent. So you can have like the child and then the child of the child. So you can have grandchildren. And that will be for 40C. But I'm going to preview some of that in this class starting this week. Okay. So, you know, let's say that if I do have an alternative, it will be like 192.168.0, let's say .11. I can type and then we'll click OK, right? And it takes it because, you know, it assumes that the human is right? And so if you have a conflict of IP, it's going to notify you. Or when you join the system to that domain or you try to contact that domain, something's going to go wrong. It's going to not connect. It'll tell you the error. Okay, now that's TCP IP version 4. We didn't really emphasize version 6, but if you need to also configure version 6, this is where, okay? This is also DHCP, but you can also put static, and we'll talk about this down the line. Okay, so you can also set, it's a little bit different than the version 4. Okay, so the subnet that is provided, we can say that it is 255.255.255.0 because it's a traditional class C. Okay. And then the default gateway, we said it's a .1. I put in the .10 instead of the .1, but at home, your router can be a DNS if you activate that rule. Just a checkbox on it, actually. Okay. So, and then you can take a screen capture. So what am I looking at for the screen capture? It's actually, let me go back. It's this right here. Whatever you put in. Okay, any question? So we did a little bit of PowerShell to look up MAC address, right? To look up, so I want to give you a little taste in PowerShell for IP. Okay, so now the tricky part about PowerShell is you need to know your interface index number. And in order to find it, you are going to open up PowerShell. Okay, let me configure this real quick, and so I can let me go a little larger on it. Okay, all right, so here's PowerShell, and then what we can do is we can do a get net IP configuration, and if you need to look at their documentation, there's great stuff on there. You can find a lot of information. Microsoft is doing a better job at documenting some of this, right? So we can do get dash net IP configuration. So unlike command prompt, we would use get net IP configuration. If you want, and if you look at like the later command, you can do a get and a set, right? And that's just programmer thing. So, right, it's just a function that they write. So here it is, right? It's basically, it's like doing IP config all. So, but what it's gonna give you is it's gonna give you the alias, and it's gonna give you the interface index. And this is needed when you need to set IP address. Okay, so if you want specific ones, you can go and look through it, and they're all different. So the Ethernet 6 is 37, right? And it's different from one system to another. Okay, so I'm on the Wi-Fi 5 on this one, so I just need to make sure that it is. And why is it this IP? Because I connected it to the RCCD network, and so therefore it gives me this IP. So if you, and then after this, you just reboot your system and it puts everything back to the normal for them. So don't worry. Okay. So on the next question here, it says, do you see the IP address configuration that you see? And so I didn't, right? Even though we set it for that, right? We connected to this network. So it actually showed me the RCCD ones. So I would say no here. Okay. And then my internet index, or my interface index for my Wi-Fi is 11. So look at yours. Okay. And that's important to make a note of before we start setting up our IP. Okay. So my recommendation for you as future administrator, right? You do inventory of your stuff once in a while. There are ways that you can take data and put it into spreadsheets and things like that, so you don't have to look things up, right? Once you, whoever set up the system, usually your tech, you can have them maintain an inventory for you, and then you can quickly use the information and then write the script to really automate some of those things. Okay, so essentially, if we deal with when we deal with IP address, we want to get the alias. We want to get this. So that's just description of your adapter. Okay. So for the next part, you are going to, there are two ways to set your IP address. The first one is going to be using new. Another command is new net IP address. And then the second command that you can use ultimately does the same. Is going to be set net IP address. Okay. So now in this one, I also wanted to add in the parameter prefix length 24. Remember the 255, 255, 255. Those are 3 octets, and each octet is 8 bits. So that means it's 24 bits. So if you want a subnet mask that's 255, 255, 255, 0, then you say prefix length 24. If you want 255, 255.0.0, 16-bit, then you can just say prefix length 16. Simple, right? So it's gonna, when we put in this parameter, it's gonna tell the system that that's the subnet mask that we want. So I tried to illustrate that here in the italics. Okay. So what you're gonna do next is you're gonna use this command with your interface index value, put it into the substitute the blue section with that, and then put in the IP address that you want, 192.168.0.25 or something like that. Okay. And I tested these on my laptop, so it should work. Okay. Unless it tells you don't have administrative right, but they told me that your account, when you use these systems, have system administration anyway. Okay. How's that? It takes it, right? Okay, good. So take a screen capture once you have that set. And if you want to verify, you can verify. But anyway, then you can do the next one. You can do set net IP address, and again use your interface index for this right here, number from number 12B, and then put in the IP address. So can we update static IP? Sure, right? But make sure that all the communicated system to that system is aware, because you know, if you have a print server and you change that print server IP and everybody's trying to send print, what happens? Just nobody can print. And then you get a phone call, right? People are angry because they can't print their, I don't know, their financial reports or something like that. So just, you want to notify people. Number one, there's network outages or any kind of system outages, you just send a massive, and some network administration software will allow you to do that. It will, when a system goes down, it will raise a flag and it automates that. But we can work out a process. Okay. So once you set the IP address, then you can take a screen capture that you did that. So now you know 2 ways to set up your IP address in Windows 10. Okay. And I put down the documentation here. So if you want to learn more commands, which you should, because you don't know how many people look for PowerShell knowledge technicians, you know. So when you take a class, especially with me, if you have hands-on, as you finish the class, you need to document the things that you learn. Even if you're not, you know, you're not an expert in it, but if you know how to use it, then you should, and you should practice, right? So you can impress the employers and you know, and then use that in your career. But because if you don't, you're gonna forget that you learned that. Because I get resume, and your resume should always reflect the type of job that you go for. I don't know how many times I emphasize that, but the things that you learn, I know that you know a lot of stuff in IT, you need to document it. You need to put that on your resume or your LinkedIn. And then PowerShell is a powerful tool. So a lot of people look for that, especially for Windows administrator jobs. Okay. Question. Yep.
So is there like a, I guess, what would you recommend to like help practice all of this?
So you can, if you want to make a virtual machine, you can. I usually just set up my PowerShell, like I run PowerShell on my laptop, and I just program on my PowerShell. So you can also write script within PowerShell because it is ultimately a shell, right? It's a bash shell. So you can just think after you are familiar with some commands, then you can just use parameters and then see how you can call an application or a program from PowerShell. Yeah, that's how people run script in PowerShell, is just to call the application file. It's actually more Linux friendly in a sense, right? Because when you do like Python script, Python is more Linux friendly, but it works. That's the challenge, is to find the people who knows how to do that in Windows. Because but yeah, their documentation is very useful. It shows you example. Okay, all right, so download this Ubuntu machine, and then you are gonna see something like this. I already created the Kubuntu machine for you. Okay, and then once you download it, it takes a few minutes, and then you're gonna right click it, go to 7-zip, and then you're gonna extract files. When you extract files, it's gonna create an unzip folder, but if you extract here, it's gonna unpack all the files there, and it's everywhere. So I like to use extract files, so it would put the folder which organized all the subfiles within it. And this mainly is, it's a way for me to just, minimize the tasks that you have to do for today. Because otherwise, creating virtual machine, it's just the wait for it. And especially Kubuntu with KDE desktop, just to set up the desktop takes a while for the system to go, especially if your RAM is limited or things like that. But I did write a tutorial in my other class for the programming student how to make it, and to install the KDE packages in Linux. So what you see is the beautiful Ubuntu, right? So they already put VirtualBox here for you, but at home, if you don't have VirtualBox, you can just download it, and it takes like 3 steps to install it. All right, so here's your VirtualBox. You're gonna click Add, and then you're gonna browse to downloads, find your Ubuntu virtual machine. Okay. 1 second. Did not like that. I'm gonna make a new. Oh, yeah, sorry. On mine, it shows little blue logo, but they use an older version. So, all right, you're gonna do a VBox file. You're gonna click Open. It's very similar to VMware if you've run VMware before, but I started to go with VirtualBox a little more because it's compatible with all systems. VMware, if you're using a Mac, you have to pay for it, and it doesn't have a player for Mac OS. All right. So once you have this, so how did I get here, right? I'm going to do it again for those of you who are trying to catch up. Open up VirtualBox. And then you're going to see a plus sign. You're going to click the plus sign, browse to your downloads that you extracted, and then find the VBox. Okay, the VBox file. Okay, so here you mounted it now. Then you are going to go ahead and click start, and it's going to take a few seconds to go, but if you want to crank up your RAM and stuff, you can change that before you click start. Okay. Now at home, if you have a brand new system, you have to enable, VM on your BIOS. Otherwise, it doesn't run virtual machine. So here's Linux, and this is Ubuntu in the back with a KDE desktop. Linux, you can install different type of desktop. So the password for this is CIS-40A because I made it for the other class when we tested, we did time it command for Linux to test some functions and it's time. So I figure I'll use the same thing so I don't have to redo the work. Okay, a little bit different. Ubuntu, you normally see the stuff at the top, right? This is kind of like the Windows. You see the application launcher here, which is the little round icon, and then you're gonna type in terminal. Which is what Ubuntu call console, which is a common name. All right. So now what I did was I had added my virtual machine and I launched it and I opened up the launcher and I opened up the terminal. So I'm at step 5. Okay. So traditionally in the older Linux, you would use, like ifconfig. They did away with the command and inet tools is being decommissioned. So I know if you're using some of the early ones and if you took earlier classes with me, you probably heard ifconfig, but ifconfig is dependent on NetTools, and NetTools would only be available if they actually have the packages that will be able to release. So you can find your IP address by using IP address. And don't you love it that it's so easy, right? And so reading it is a little different. Here you are going to have the inet, but it's going to tell you what kind of interface that you're using. So when you see link ether, that means it's an Ethernet interface. That's your Ethernet adapter. Okay? And for Linux, it's going to like to give you a loopback. All system calls home. So your loopback address is there, 127.0.0.1. That's the traditional loopback address. And you see the /8, that means it's 8 bits that are on. So it's gonna be the actual subnet mask. That's what it's giving you. When you look at the other inet address, the /24 indicates the subnet mask for that IP. Okay. So they're using a class A. How do I know it's a class A? Well, you look at the first octet. If it's between 1 and 126, that's a class A. But tricky part is you have to look at the subnet mask because some administrator, in order to expand their IP address, they will lean into other classes because they ran out. So Class A got a lot of IP addresses, right? Or they want to narrow it down. So you can use subnet mask in another class to control how the number of networks and the number of hosts that you would have on the network. We'll talk about subnetting later, okay? Right now, we're just trying to figure out how to look at IP and set IP for now. Okay, so see how this broadcast address, it ends with 255. Like I said, we do not use 255 for your client system, any host. Okay, that's only used for broadcasting. Okay, all right, so now you can see it. And then the version 6 is here. Okay, that's /64-bit. Okay, so now you can see how that's done. Then let's look at the next part. So after you find the information, answer the question here. What is your loopback address? What is your inet address for the Ethernet interface? Then what you're going to do is you are going to click on, go back to application launcher. You're going to click on, you're going to find system settings. I forgot to make it capitalized. So go here, and then here's your system settings. This looks similar to Mac OS, so as you can see. And then what you're going to do is you are going to scroll down and you're going to find connections. It's under network. Okay. And you know, my virtual machine is cutting off here. So you're gonna slide it right. And then what you're gonna do is it allows you to change some of the configuration right here. So you're gonna put version 4. And then you're gonna change to manual, which is for static. Okay. So here it tells me that after I locate the connections, I'm gonna go to the IP version 4 tab, click on manual, drop down, and then you're gonna click the plus sign and you're gonna type in your IP that you want to set. All right, pick a number between those. Okay. So back to this, click the add button, and it's gonna make this little field right here. Okay. Then you're gonna type it in. Just type it in 192.168.0. Let's say 149, and so on. Then your network, there is subnet mask that automatically fill. I'm sorry you can't see it on the projection because it's white, but it should say 255.255.255.0. And then your gateway, we type in 192.168.0.1. The reason why I'm using class C is you're familiar with this from home, and we've been using this, but you know, we will have more practice with other classes in the next lab. Okay. So now I'm done, right? I just have to click apply. And keep in mind that now when you go manual like this, right, you have to be on that network. So later on, if you're trying to surf the internet in your virtual machine, this one, then you need to just put it back to dynamic, and then it should be fine. Okay, click apply, and there you have it. Okay, so now you know how to set it in Linux on using the graphical user interface. Okay. So what is the provided subnet mask? It would be the same as the other one, 255.255.255.0, right? And then how many bits? Okay, so when you look at this, all the bits are on, so that's 8, another 8, and another 8, that's 24. Therefore, earlier you see the /24, right? So 24 bits are network ID in a 32-bit address. So the only ones that are not on is the last one. Okay. Octet, meaning 4 of the 8 bits. And what class is you? Traditional class C. And you can find the information also in your notes this week. I put a little table there for you. Okay, once you set your IP, take a screen capture of this. All right, that's not enough for me, right? You know me. If you do it on a GUI, you have to do it in command line. Because we have to have alternate way to set things. Okay, so now when you're using Debian Linux, that's including Kali, Raspberry Pi, Ubuntu, you always, when you log on as another user, you want to do sudo, that stands for super user do. And we are going to use IP address, and you're going to click add. The 24 here is going to just be your network ID, your subnet mask. And then for the def, that is, I put 0, right? It's going to show you the 0, okay? So where can I find this information? If you go back to here, let me see if it shows you. Where did I see that yesterday? Yeah, right here. You see that? And it's varied, okay? So don't rely on ENP003S3. For our system, the virtual machine that you have, it's going to use that. But in other cases, make sure that you open up the IP address configuration and you look at this. Okay. This is for the prefix route. That's just an identifier for that. So that's where you find the ENP0S3. Okay. Make sure it's a 0, not an O. Okay, we need to replace the value of your IP address and then make sure that you check this. So it's the same. And then after that, we are going to show the IP again. And then take a screen capture. Mhm.
Downloading the virtual machine. I don't know if I'm downloading the app, so I will do it. And then I upload it. I don't know where it's going. Okay, this is not letting you. And I searched for the browser check. Yeah. And I download the multipass, but it's still gonna give me. Yeah, you know. Okay. Okay, so. Use another browser. Okay, awesome. Are you okay with the work?
It's already there. Yeah, you just need to open it. They installed it already. I asked them to. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh,
If it's not giving you any red text error, then it's okay.
oh,
You good? Yeah, Windows, PowerShell, and well, command line. If it takes it, then you don't. It's not. So you want it not to complain. That's my point, right? So you want it to accept it. So you're good. If you see red text error, they'll tell you what kind of error it is. Then it's
So afterwards,
Mhm.
I had another question. Sure. So I was having trouble with PowerShell, and I kept on getting these errors. I don't know, maybe because I didn't put this IP address instead of that.
Yeah, so you don't have a full IP here. So you want to do 192.168.0. Let's say 123 or 153 or something like that. You need another octet.
So would it be this one that I made?
Yeah, you can use that one unless somebody else is using it. Yeah. So as long as it's unique, you have to have 4, right? You have to have all the 4 octets in there. Any other questions? Okay.
Because when I press it, it says it's wrong. I don't know if it's because
It's like 20. application interface index. Okay, so you don't have, oh, I need to change that number. You know what your interface index is 12?
Yeah, 12.
So set number to a chart. Options for maybe they don't let you change it. Verify fields. So your Wi-Fi yeah, your Wi-Fi 4 is in index 9. So we'll change the index. Just make sure, because yeah, on the Ethernet you don't want to change. That's okay. Oh, because yours is disconnected. I'm not on it. Oh, because it's today. Well, yeah, we'll turn this on. It's the signal. So connect. And we'll just tell it to go because it doesn't, if you don't have it connected to a wireless network, it doesn't. I'm actually try to update it. So logging right now. So downloading. Yeah, the password is there. Yeah. So just copy your hyperlink. Copy hyperlink. So open up Firefox. Yeah, the browser is out of date. Second for it. How's that now?
Oh, sorry, I was right clicking a little too much. We changed that, yeah.
See if you can take, it'll take that one. Should it? If no one else is using it. we are. Yeah, and then everything's good. Let me check online. I think it should work.
Okay.
Do you have any question on Zoom? No question on Zoom?
Hello?
How are you guys doing? Just waiting for the VM?
No, I'm just curious. I'm getting the red on in the windows
I guess likely.
when I try to set the address.
That, um,
Is that I get access denied?
Oh, yeah. So after you updated the IP and you click apply, yeah, you can check your IP at, are you talking about the virtual machine?
yeah.
Yeah. Then you can see, you can type in IP address and see if it's updated.
Oh, I'm looking for
INET,
I
the second one, whatever the, so when you take a look at it, you have to look at where your Ethernet was. Because when you selected this, right? There's only one connection for it, which is your Ethernet, because your virtual machine sees everything through the host. So yeah, you would check it through. Okay. Now see how mine, it didn't, even though I apply it, you know why it does that? Because it's using the setting for the virtual machine still takes over. You see, so even if you set it in here for the virtual machines, you also need to set it on the outside of the virtual machine. Yeah, that means that at the top of the virtual machine, you would go into settings, because it's translating whatever that you're doing to the actual network of your host system. Is still using the host system number. That's why you see the .10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But on a regular Linux, let's say that you're running like a Linux laptop, you would then set this, and then when you run the IP, you would see it. Yeah. I get access denied for question 14. Sorry, Cynthia, let me double check and I'll run this. So, okay. Yeah, so if you get access denied, it's because your PowerShell, you can try to run PowerShell as admin, Michelle. So you can right click the application and then choose run as admin and see if it does it. But if you're not on your home network and you're using somebody else's, then they might have locked it down, because sometimes that's the case. It's a permission control thing. So I think I'm 11, right? Yeah. Index is 11. Yeah, were you guys successful when you did this for the set IP? You get this, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, that's fine. I think they locked this here. So because okay, so when the system is joined to the domain, what it does is it's creating like a root directory that's going to tie to that particular domain in the back. So this is what, because it doesn't have that existing location, that's what it's telling you. Okay. Yeah, so that's fine. You can take a screenshot of this. So it tells me here that no matching NSTF net address objects, because if we didn't join it to our network, right, it's not going to want, it can't find the CIM query instances for the root standard. So that's normal. But I did this on my laptop at home. And yeah, it takes it because you know, at home, your address is 192.168. That's your router.
Yeah.
So you can try it at home and see if you can actually set your static IP through PowerShell. It works. Guarantee you, I tested 3 times. Like, I don't like to document things for my class like, you know, I'm not one of those faculties to try it. If it doesn't work, it works, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like I wanted to see, and we can plan all the things in a different network, and then when we bring it here, there's like other variable that you have to consider, right? Like how they control the permission here, well, you know. And so if it says access denied because the application is controlled and you can't, you know, add modify things, that's right. And then when it's like this is because we're not part of the network. But if you're using something in their network, like the 10 dot whatever, right, you can, and if you have the permission to, you can change it. Okay. So, but that's okay. At least you know how, right? If it's worse of an error, so this means that it sees it, but because the address is not part of the root, it didn't take it. Otherwise, if you have other form of error, it's going to tell you specifically, like if it's syntax error or whatever, it'll tell you like which parameter it didn't take. So here, what it's saying is the set net IP address, there's no matching for that found in the query. Okay. So that's okay. Take a screenshot of this.
Professor?
And then you can try to do the new, which you did already previously, right? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm gonna switch it with the 9.
Okay. Yeah, mine is 11. So every system, as you can see, it's slightly different. So I looked here, my Wi-Fi 5 is 11, right? And then you can look at others. I know for sure that you can't do the Ethernet. You can try the 37, but it will take you off of their network though.
It says that the object already exists for my new one, so that means
Yeah.
that somebody has my IP, or somebody has the IP already.
No,
No?
yeah. So it might be that it created it. So this, the fix for is that you have to create the object. So if it's set sometime prior, could be. Yeah, you know, shell arguments is a little bit more obscure compared to like, you know, Linux command shell or something like that. But if you are familiar with shell, you're gonna see a lot of shell interface on like cloud environment. Azure uses it, right? CLI is very common everywhere for IT. So you have to get used to use command line. And you can start with help if you're not sure, read their documentation. And that's gonna help a little bit. Okay. So yeah, so on the now on the yeah, so if you want to configure your virtual machines, that's right there, right? And then you can modify. So in the network area, it default to the network address translation, which you want is because you want it to go from private to public. So it treats your host as a public address, and it integrate that with also your virtual adapter, right? Whatever when they install the software, the end cap it actually take over, and you see that it start the setting for the adapter. So it's going to use the adapter address, and then it's going to translate it to the host address, which the machine sees the host almost like a public IP kind of like. So it uses the host to route out your packet. So you're still going to get the 10 dot whatever because it's using the virtual adapter. Okay.
I have a question. So say you use like a wireless adapter that needs like I guess like software interface on your host. Would you need to like download that on the virtual machine, or would you like consider like?
Yeah, so if you're using a wireless adapter on the host, it just treats the adapter as wired. It doesn't see the wireless side unless you tell it that it's a wireless side. So by default, if you don't say anything, if you don't configure anything, it's gonna look at that adapter as a wired adapter because that's how the software, the hypervisor, it's programmed to do that. So earlier, you know, how we configured, you gotta go see, here's the wire, right? It's gonna see, so here's my connection, right? And then I go here, and then I set up the address, okay? Now, then you also have like other things like automatic, we already know automatic only certain addresses, so it's gonna group it in the range. And then you can also have link local, and then manual is the static. So even if you have the static in here, right? Let me see if I can apply this. Go back to console and see if it takes it. Yeah, so it's still gonna take the Ethernet, it's still gonna take the virtual machine address, and it's still gonna do that. But if you do the sudo set IP, see if it will change the IP address.
So say, I guess, the manufacturer requires you to like download a certain type of software or to like interact with it, what you need to do, I guess, download the same type of software on the virtual machine.
What do you mean the manufacturer for?
Like, it's like,
Oh, like for your adapter?
yeah,
Okay, like driver?
yeah, like
Okay. Yeah. So you want to update the driver inside the virtual machine itself. So what you would do is make sure that it's USB enabled, and then you plug in the adapter, right? Make sure that it sees the adapter, and then you have to go and download the drivers. Otherwise, and the driver makes sure it's capable of, it's compatible with Debian Linux, because not all drivers are compatible with Debian Linux, right? Sometimes, usually they would do, if it's Linux compatible, then it's compatible for most of them, including Debian, but not always the case, right? And that's the challenge. This is why people don't use Linux system, is because sometimes when you have hardware or things that are rare, it's not, you can't find it. Manufacturers start to support more of it now. So, or sometimes you might find packages that you can create a driver for it. And, you know, that's why some people don't use certain adapters. So if I get a biometrics reader, good luck, right? Like I might not be able to find anything that would be for that. But wireless adapter, you know, other things, that storage devices, yeah, you're gonna find either the firmware would also activate it because it's compatible with it, or you will find driver that will be compatible. So yeah, I would recommend download the driver for it if you could find it. I still got the previous, yeah, it's not updated. So as I was saying this to Cynthia and everybody, is because it's still using, right, your it's still using your virtual machine IP address, which is host base, because the setting for your virtual machines here on the top, it's still going to take that and translate it, even though we apply it here. So if we remove the NAT configuration and make sure that it treats it as an individual machine instead of using the host machine IP, then it will take the IP address that we put in. Are we supposed? No, I didn't put the step for that. I just want you to know how to work with the interface, and then to also put it in. Yeah, it's still gonna, it wants, so if you look at the machine setting here, and then you go here, right? This is, if you bridge the adapter or if you do host only adapter, that makes a difference in how it's going to give the IP, because it's still using the IP that the host is using. Why is that? Because I see that here, this is RCCD IP. Okay. And then I previously see that up here. my VirtualBox. Yeah, so the host only, you see that? That's going to be 192. But then now we're not host only. If you look here, it's NAT. So if we want to change that to host only adapter, you're going to see the difference in the address. You can play with it. Virtual machine, you can always delete it and re-download it. Okay, play with it. That's what VM is for. So if we make it host only adapter, right? And then see if the IP changes.
For some reason, I don't have access to the internet. So keep on canceling my download.
Let me see.
Okay. I signed in with my user and just
Oh, because maybe you set the configuration.
oh. Okay, I didn't switch my stuff back.
Yeah, you set your
Okay.
static IP, that's why it took you off of the internet.
Okay.
So we just make sure that it's dynamic. Now it's gonna get the IP address. See?
Okay, cool.
We're on. Now it's gonna find the network and then yeah, that one we want update automatically. Good. Awesome. So we're both on here. Now you should be able to get
I think that's oh, it's a Firefox.
this is still download. Oh, let's see. Enter something. Okay. Still going or is it slow? What's the subnet mask? All 255, all the bits are on. So that's the first one is octet 55. I mean, it's so 1 byte. Next one is 2 bytes, so 16 bits. Third one is, that's why it's slash 24. Oh.
And where do you find out which type of,
You will find that in the notes. That's in
Oh,
my
okay.
video, but yes, that's the class C. So when you see 255, 255, 255, 0, that's a traditional class C.
So I was taking pictures. For some reason, it's different. Oh, sorry.
I can transfer for you. Where's your USB?
Oh, right here.
Yeah, give it to me and then I'll put it. I'll transfer directly USB. Because I downloaded on their computer here. So let me Any questions? I'm gonna get out of my virtual machine so I can give Cynthia the. Actually, I'll give Cynthia the zip file. That's better. See at the moment. It's only going to take about 4 gig of the drive, okay? And then it's going right now. So let me shut down. Shut down now is a command that I learned in Red Hat from a long time ago because I had to learn commands. There was no GUI back then. Okay, I'll stay on for a few more minutes, but I'm going to stop recording